world of high finance is often a theater of precision, where numbers define reality and trust is the ultimate currency. But in June 2020, that reality shattered into a billion pieces, leaving behind a void that even the most seasoned investigators struggled to fathom. At the center of this cataclysm was Jan Marsalek, the chief operating officer of the German payment giant Wirecard. He was not just a high-ranking corporate executive, he was the primary mastermind behind a facade that had deceived the global market for over a decade. When the auditors finally demanded proof of the company's assets, they did not find a minor accounting error. Instead, they discovered a gaping black hole where 1.9 billion euros were supposed to be held in escrow accounts. This was no simple mistake, when it was the largest financial fraud in post-war German history. And as the massive house of cards began to tumble, Marsalek performed the ultimate vanishing act. In the critical 48-hour window following the revelation that the money likely did not exist, the Wirecard headquarters in Munich became a scene of desperation. While the board of directors scrambled to salvage what was left of the company's reputation, Marsalek was already several steps ahead of the law. He understood that the game was over, but he had no intention of facing the legal consequences of his actions. As the company's stock price entered a death spiral and the corporate empire collapsed, he vanished into the ether, leaving behind a trail of digital ghosts and unanswered questions. And the initial leads pointed everywhere and nowhere at once, stretching from the orderly streets of Munich to the tropical heat of the Philippines, the political landscape of Belarus, and eventually deep into the protection of Russia. The international response was immediate and intense. Interpol quickly issued a red notice. The document detailed a staggering list of criminal charges, including aggravated fraud, embezzlement, and sophisticated market manipulation. Marsalek was no longer just a businessman. He was classified as one of the most wanted white-collar criminals in modern history. Possessing vast resources and alleged intelligence ties, he operated far beyond the reach of standard policing. The atmosphere at the headquarters was one of suffocating tension. Rondi employees, who'd once taken pride in their status as part of a tech champion, watched in horror as their company became synonymous with crime. Marsalek's final communications with his colleagues and the board of directors were masterclasses in psychological deception. He remained eerily calm, projected an air of professional confidence, and even suggested he was traveling to the Philippines to personally track down the missing funds and resolve the discrepancy. It was a calculated lie designed to buy him time. While authorities were focused on Southeast Asia, he was moving in a completely different direction, utilizing private assets to bypass traditional borders. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This global search for the truth is only beginning, and the depth of the deception goes much further than just missing bank balances. How does a man responsible for billions of euros simply disappear in an age of total global surveillance? The mystery of Jan Marsalek is not just about the money he took, but the dangerous secrets he kept. As investigators began to dig deeper into the records at the Munich office, they realized the COO had been living a double life for years. He was not just managing electronic payments. He was navigating a world of private intelligence, high-stakes geopolitics, and extreme digital deception. The fake paper trail he created was convincing enough to ensure investigators were chasing a ghost. He had weaponized the very systems meant to track him, using his knowledge of international travel and financial oversight to mask his movements. His disappearance sent shockwaves through the financial world, exposing regulators' failures. The trail was cold before police reached the airport, and Marsalek's shadow grew over a broken empire and a stunned, silent world. To understand the magnitude of Jan Marsalek's escape, one must first look at the foundation upon which his fraudulent empire was built. Wirecard was not just another payment processor. It was the crown jewel of European technology, a meteoric success story that eventually clawed its way into the prestigious DAX 30 index. This ascent was fueled by a carefully curated image of innovation and dominance. But behind the glass walls of the executive suite, a much darker reality pulsed. The corporate culture was defined by an extreme level of secrecy and an aggressive posture toward any form of dissent. Marsalek, alongside his colleagues, cultivated an environment where internal questions were silenced and external critics were treated as existential threats. For years, financial journalists and brave whistleblowers had raised red flags about suspicious transaction volumes and questionable acquisitions. Yet their warnings were systematically suppressed. The company employed private investigators to shadow critics and used the legal system as a bludgeon to maintain the facade of profitability. Central to this deception was a labyrinth of special projects and offshore accounts. These were not mere bookkeeping errors, but a sophisticated architecture of illusion. Wirecard claimed to generate massive profits through third-party acquirers in places like Dubai, Dublin, and Singapore, regions where regulatory oversight was conveniently lax. In reality, even these partners were often little more than empty offices or shell companies, used to inflate balance sheets and create the appearance of a global powerhouse. While the world saw a fintech giant, Marsalek was managing a house of cards held together by digital phantoms. This internal rot allowed the company to bypass the scrutiny of regulators like BaFin, who were so enamored with Germany's answer to Silicon Valley that they failed to see the theft occurring in plain sight. As the walls finally began to close in during that fateful week in June 2020, Marsalek's preparation for a swift exit became apparent. The timeline of his escape reads like a script from a high-stakes espionage thriller. While the public believed he was flying to the Philippines to find the missing billions, and Marsalek was actually being driven toward an Austrian airfield, he utilized a private jet, coordinated through a network of contacts that extended far beyond the traditional business world. To further obfuscate his path, he orchestrated a sophisticated digital smokescreen. Falsified travel records were entered into the Philippine immigration databases, making it appear as though he had landed in Manila and then traveled onward to China. This fake paper trail successfully diverted the attention of international investigators for several critical days, providing the fugitive with a massive head start. The mechanics of this disappearance were not the work of an executive acting alone, but the result of deep-seated connections with former intelligence officers and security professionals. When these facilitators provided the logistics necessary for a high-profile target to cross borders undetected. In the wake of his flight, investigators discovered a cache of burner phones and logs of encrypted communications that detailed the precision of coordination. Marsalek had effectively weaponized his proximity to the world of secret services, a narrative that earned him the moniker of the spy CEO. His life prior to the collapse had been one of ostentatious luxury, including private villas, high-end security details, and a penchant for high-risk operations that blurred the lines between corporate strategy and state-level intelligence work. The most haunting question remains: how can nearly 2 billion euros simply evaporate from a supposedly regulated financial system? The answer lies in the exploitation of trust and the complexity of modern digital finance. Marsalek understood that in a world of instantaneous global transfers, a number on a screen is often accepted as truth until someone insists on seeing the actual vault. He leveraged this systemic vulnerability, using the very infrastructure meant to ensure security to mask his embezzlement. The 1.9 billion euros were never physical cash. They were digital entries in a ledger that existed only as long as no one checked the source. This shadow life allowed him to operate effortlessly. The fallout from the disappearance of Jan Marsalek extends far beyond the missing billions on a balance sheet. It shattered the very foundation of European financial credibility. In the wake of the collapse, the spotlight turned sharply toward BaFin and Germany's federal financial supervisor. The agency was not merely caught off guard. It faced accusations of active negligence and institutional bias. For years, BaFin had seemingly prioritized the protection of a national tech champion over the investigation of credible fraud allegations. The scandal reached the highest levels of government, prompting a parliamentary inquiry that exposed a systemic failure of oversight. This was not just a corporate failure, but a regulatory catastrophe that forced a complete overhaul of how financial technology firms are audited across the continent. The era of blind trust in digital growth was replaced by a rigid, often skeptical scrutiny, permanently altering the global fintech landscape. Beyond the halls of corporate power, the human cost was truly devastating, with the thousands of small-scale retail investors, many of whom had poured their life savings into what they believed was a safe, blue-chip stock, saw their wealth vanish overnight. The betrayal of trust by the executive suite in Munich left a permanent scar on the culture of investment, reminding everyone that even the most prestigious symbols can be hollow. While the financial world reeled, the search for the fugitive COO entered a complex geopolitical dimension. Despite the Interpol Red Notice branding Jan Marsalek as one of the world's most wanted criminals, the trail effectively hit a wall of state protection. Current intelligence suggests that Marsalek found sanctuary within the borders of the Russian Federation. Reports indicate he may be residing in a highly secured compound near Moscow, possibly under the protection of the very intelligence services he allegedly assisted during his tenure at Wirecard. This has ignited significant diplomatic tension, as Western authorities have met a consistent refusal from Russian officials to cooperate with extradition requests. In this shadow life, the former executive is rumored to have undergone significant physical transformations, including plastic surgery and the adoption of various high-level aliases supported by state-issued documentation. He exists now as a digital ghost, a man who knows far too much about the intersection of global finance and covert operations to be easily discarded or surrendered. The Red Notice remains active, a constant reminder of the limits of international law enforcement when a fugitive becomes a strategic asset to a sovereign power. The pursuit is no longer just a criminal investigation. It is a stalemate in the broader theater of international relations. As years pass, the legal focus has shifted to the remaining Wirecard executives who did not manage to escape. These ongoing trials serve as a proxy for the justice that Marsalek evades, as former colleagues offer testimonies that paint a picture of a company run like a criminal syndicate rather than a technology leader. These proceedings may eventually reveal more about the mechanics of the theft, but the central figure remains conspicuously absent. There is a growing, grim realization among investigators that the case may ultimately become a cold one, with the mastermind never facing a courtroom. Yet this case stands as a permanent cautionary tale of corporate greed and the dangers of a growth at all costs mentality. It highlights how easily regulatory frameworks can be bypassed when a company is perceived as too big to fail or too technologically advanced to understand. Ultimately, the mystery of the missing 1.9 billion euros raises a profound question about the nature of modern wealth. Was that sum ever a tangible reality, or was it simply a digital phantom, a collection of bits and bytes used to manipulate human psychology? Whether the money was stolen or simply never existed, the vacuum it left behind is very real. Jan Marsalek remains the keeper of that final secret, the man who orchestrated the greatest vanishing act in the history of global finance, leaving the world to wonder if he will ever emerge from the shadows.